Letting go often begins with a sense of relief, a breath of fresh air that you didn't know you were holding in. It feels like stepping out of a room that had no windows and realizing you've been surviving without oxygen for far too long. In that moment, there's a glimpse of clarity, a quiet understanding that you made the right choice, whether it was walking away from a toxic relationship, a draining friendship, a job that stifled your spirit, or even a belief that no longer served your group. You feel powerful, you feel brave, you feel light. But that's only the first wave. What comes next is something no one warns you about: the internal shock. And it's far more subtle than we expect. You see, the shock isn't always loud. It's not always an emotional explosion. Sometimes it's the numbness that catches you off guard, the silence after the storm that feels eerie. You thought chaos was the problem, but now the calm makes you uneasy. That's because your emotional system has become conditioned to respond to chaos, to conflict, to constant engagement, even if it was painful. The sudden absence of that noise doesn't automatically bring peace. It brings disorientation. Your mind, which was so used to patterns of emotional tension, now doesn't know what to do with stillness. It begins searching for what's missing. And in doing so, it turns back to what you've let go. It begins to question your decision, not because the decision was wrong, but because the familiar is gone. And when something is gone, your subconscious mind equates it to loss, and loss always triggers the survival mechanisms within you. This is where the confusion starts to unfold. At this stage, your body might feel unsettled. Your energy shifts. You could experience sleepless nights or an inexplicable heaviness in the middle of the day. You might scroll through your phone, not to reach out, but to look back. You glance at old pictures, old messages, replay old conversations in your head. You're not trying to go back, but your emotional system is craving what used to regulate it. This is not weakness. This is the withdrawal of attachment. The shock doesn't just hit your heart. It disorients your nervous system. In those moments, doubt creeps in. Not because you truly regret what you did, but because the mind is looking for safety. And ironically, it tries to find that safety in the very place you escaped from. You begin to hear internal whispers. Maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe I was too harsh. What if I never find something better? These thoughts aren't logical. They're survival-based. They arise because the identity you had while you were attached to that person or situation is now being questioned. And identity hates uncertainty. Well, there's a profound realization that starts to come over you. You weren't just letting go of someone or something. You were letting go of a version of yourself that was deeply intertwined with it. So the shock is double layered. One layer is the absence of the other person, the circumstance, the habit. The second layer, and the deeper one, is the disruption of your own self-concept. You feel a subtle inner tremor, like your soul is adjusting to a new frequency. But the static hasn't cleared yet. That adjustment phase is uncomfortable. You may find yourself emotionally flinching at simple things, a memory, a scent, or a random piece of music. You might experience moments where you instinctively reach out for your phone to share something with someone you've already cut ties with. The gesture is automatic. It reveals just how deeply embedded that emotional connection was in your daily behavior. And every time you catch yourself doing it, another wave of confusion hits. Why am I still thinking about them if I know it was toxic? Because healing doesn't follow logic, it follows rhythm. This stage of emotional shock also exposes the truth about your emotional dependencies. You start to see clearly the patterns you didn't notice before. You begin to understand how much of your emotional safety was outsourced to someone or something outside of you. And now you're left standing alone in the emotional field that once belonged to two. The silence is deafening. The emptiness feels overwhelming, but beneath all that, something else is emerging. A deep, almost invisible internal strength that hasn't fully formed yet, but is beginning to surface. In this space, you may isolate, not to hide, but to feel. The world might continue around you, but your inner world becomes the only sound you can hear. This is where emotional confusion disguises itself as loneliness, even though it's really a transition into self-realization. It's like a caterpillar in a cocoon, still silent, unaware that transformation is happening in the stillness. But unlike the caterpillar, you are conscious of every layer being stripped away, every emotion unearthing itself, every past attachment echoing back in fragments. And this awareness, while painful, is necessary. The shock of letting go is not the absence of what you left. It's the presence of everything that remained hidden beneath the attachment. It's a mirror, and it doesn't lie. It reflects your fears, your coping mechanisms, your patterns of overgiving or clinging or denying your own needs. It shows you where you handed away your power and where you need to take it back. Not in a dramatic, vengeful way, but in a quiet reclaiming of your emotional sovereignty. And during this phase, your soul doesn't speak in bold declarations. It whispers. It gently nudges. It begins to ask questions you've never asked before. Who am I without this? What do I truly want? What have I been avoiding by holding on? These are not easy questions, and their answers don't come in a flash. They unfold over time. But it all begins in this stage, the shock of release, the stillness after the storm, the quiet before the rise. The mind is a powerful architect of illusion, and when you let go of someone or something deeply tied to your emotions, one of the first illusions it constructs is regret. Not the kind of regret based on deep truth, but the kind born from selective memory. It begins subtly. You find yourself thinking about the good moments, the laughter, the comfort, the way they looked at you when things were still alive between you. Your memory plays these moments on repeat like a highlight reel, slowly fading out the arguments, the disrespect, the neglect, the pain that led you to walk away in the first place. And this is where emotional confusion begins to deepen. Not because you were wrong to leave, but because the mind craves familiarity more than it craves peace. This illusion doesn't come from your heart. It comes from your subconscious. Your emotional system, conditioned by time and repetition, begins to resist the void that follows detachment. The silence of letting go becomes louder than the chaos you escaped. And your thoughts begin to reach backward, trying to find meaning in a place where there is none left. You replay conversations and twist them. You reinterpret actions with a softer lens. You remember the birthday message, but forget the weeks of silence. You remember their smile, but forget the way you felt ignored when you needed their presence the most. This is not a sign that you made the wrong decision. It's a sign that your mind is trying to protect you from discomfort by offering you a false sense of safety in the past. The illusion of regret is like a mirage in the desert. It looks like something real, something nourishing, but the closer you get to it, the more it disappears. It's not truth. It's emotional distortion. It's your subconscious trying to find balance in the imbalance of loss. And during this phase, even the pain you endured might start to look like love. Because to the mind, even pain feels better than emptiness when you're not emotionally grounded. There's also something deeply vulnerable about this stage. You feel exposed. You begin to wonder if you overreacted, if you were too emotional, too sensitive, too demanding. And this self-questioning doesn't arrive from wisdom. It stems from the illusion that maybe things were better than they were. You see, the mind wants closure. It wants a narrative it can understand. But letting go doesn't always come with explanations or clean endings. So your thoughts fill in the blanks. They rewrite the story in a way that offers false comfort, often at the expense of your truth. You might even start imagining how things could have been if you stayed, if you had tried a little harder, if you had said this instead of that, if you had waited just a little longer, maybe they would have changed. These imagined versions of a reality that never existed begin to take emotional space in your mind. You fantasize about potential. You dwell on the idea of who they could have become, not who they really were. And this creates internal chaos because your soul remembers why you left, but your emotions are temporarily intoxicated by hope that no longer serves you. There's a part of you in this stage that wants to reach out, not because you believe they're the right person, but because you want to silence the confusion. You want something to make sense again. You want to feel that connection, even if just for a moment, so you can anchor your identity to something you used to understand. But that pull isn't a sign of love. It's a symptom of emotional disorientation. You're not longing for them. You're longing for clarity, for safety, for a familiar emotional rhythm that feels lost in the aftermath of detachment. And here's what makes this stage particularly tricky. Other people can't see the storm inside you. From the outside, it may look like you've moved on, but inside, you're questioning everything. You smile at work, engage in conversations, post like you're fine, but internally, your mind is waging a quiet war against your own intuition. You knew it wasn't healthy. You knew it wasn't right. But now, in the absence of constant emotional stimulation, your mind creates illusions to explain the emptiness. The illusion of regret is fed by memories, by what ifs, by loneliness. You start to seek signs, random coincidences that you interpret as maybe the universe wants us to be together. A song plays on the radio and it reminds you of them. You see a post they made and it feels like it's about you. You drive past a place you used to go together and suddenly the emotional floodgates open. This is the mind trying to assign meaning to coincidence, trying to find logic in the emotional chaos. But meaning doesn't come from repetition of thought. Meaning comes from truth. And the truth, though buried under layers of illusion, remains unchanged. If something truly brought peace, consistency, and love, you wouldn't have had to let it go. The very act of release was born from truth. But the emotional mind, threatened by uncertainty, clings to fantasy, and that fantasy paints the past with colors that never existed. It places gold on what was rusting. It puts roses on a field that was already burning. In this stage, you will have to sit with yourself in uncomfortable silence. You will have to remind yourself that feelings aren't facts and memories aren't reality. They're reflections filtered through emotion. The illusion of regret is temporary, it passes. But in the moment, it feels like drowning in a sea of false hope. It convinces you to look back. Even though everything inside you knows the healing is forward, this stage isn't meant to punish you, it's meant to expose the parts of you that were still holding on to potential, to fantasy, to emotional attachments that were never real security. It is the test between your memory and your maturity, between comfort and courage, between illusion and healing. When you release someone or something that has been deeply entangled with your sense of identity, the question soon arises, who are you without them? This is not just a matter of emotional detachment, but a deep internal transformation. The person, the situation, the belief. It had become a defining part of how you saw yourself. Whether you realized it or not, you had woven aspects of that relationship, job, or identity into the fabric of who you were. The emotional bond wasn't merely a connection, it was a part of your self-concept. So when you let go, the most profound question that follows is, who am I without it? This question stirs confusion because it digs into the very foundation of how you define your worth. You may find yourself in moments of stillness, overwhelmed by the absence of a role you once played. If you were someone's partner, you might feel lost in the space that once belonged to the shared us. If you were tied to a job, the sudden gap where you once found your purpose may leave you feeling rudderless. Without that attachment, you're not just missing a person or a position. You're missing the version of yourself that you were when you had those things. This is the true weight of letting go. It's not just about releasing another person or an external influence. It's about the identity that you had come to associate with them. When you remove that piece of the puzzle, it feels like an essential part of you has vanished. The person who used to define you, the position that used to give you structure, the behavior that used to guide you, they're all gone, and with them, so is the version of yourself you had grown accustomed to. This is where confusion takes root. The sense of self that was tied to the external begins to unravel. The ego doesn't know what to do with this gap. It resists the silence because it fears the unknown. Who are you if you are no longer that partner, that employee, that friend? You no longer fit into the roles you once inhabited. You don't yet know what your new role looks like. So you feel as though you're standing in an emotional limbo. This is the emotional crisis that often follows detachment, the identity crisis. For so long, the self you knew was built on the structure of others' perceptions, your circumstances, or your connection to the world around you. Letting go of that structure is like pulling the foundation out from under a house. The house may still stand, but it will feel shaky, unsure. The familiar walls of your identity begin to crumble, and in their place is uncertainty. It's as though you're watching yourself from the outside, wondering if the person you've always been is the person you still want to be. The mind, in its desperate attempt to make sense of the confusion, starts to cling to fragments of the old self. It attempts to resurrect the past, holding on to the person you used to be because it doesn't know how to exist without that frame of reference. So you find yourself thinking about the old you, how you used to dress, how you used to talk, how you interacted with others when you were still within that identity. You try to resurrect those old behaviors, not because they serve you, but because they're the only thing that feels stable. The problem is, you can't move forward while holding on to the past. The version of you that once thrived in those circumstances is now obsolete. The confusion is not about the external loss. It's about realizing that you've outgrown a piece of yourself. This phase of emotional disorientation often causes people to question their worth. If you were defined by being someone's partner, being in a particular job or fitting a particular role, you may feel less valuable now that those labels are gone. You might think, who am I now? This question isn't just a reflection of the loss of another. It's a deep look at your own sense of identity. You might start to ask yourself, was I valuable because of my role? Was my worth connected to how others saw me? And if so, who am I without their validation? In the midst of this confusion, there can be a lot of self-doubt. You begin to question your abilities, your decisions, and your place in the world. But the truth is, this confusion is a necessary part of transformation. It's the moment before clarity. It's the fertile soil where new growth begins to take root. But to experience that growth, you must first embrace the discomfort of being in in-between identity. You are not who you were, but you are also not who you will become yet. This space of uncertainty is a threshold, a space of waiting, of refining, of becoming. As this identity crisis unfolds, you may find yourself experimenting with new behaviors, new patterns, or new ways of thinking. This is the process of rediscovering who you are outside of the attachments that once defined you. You might try things you never thought of before, or develop new habits that feel strange but exciting. It's in this space that you start to uncover your true essence. When you strip away the labels and the external roles, you get to explore who you are at your core. It's a beautiful process, though it doesn't always feel that way in the moment. At first, you may feel lost, disconnected, and uncertain. But the more you lean into this unknown, the more you begin to find pieces of yourself that were buried beneath the expectations, the roles, and the identities you had taken on. This stage is the unfolding of your real self. The self that doesn't need to rely on external validation or roles to feel whole. You'll slowly realize that the identity you've been clinging to was only a mask, a version of yourself that you constructed in response to your circumstances. But underneath that mask, there's a deeper, truer you waiting to emerge. It may take time, but this period of confusion is exactly the space you need to get in touch with the person you were always meant to be. And though it feels like an emotional storm, it is, in reality, the calm before your own personal rebirth. The emotional turbulence that follows letting go is not simply about missing someone or something. It's about confronting your deepest insecurities and unresolved emotions that were buried under the weight of that attachment. After the release, you will often experience a profound sense of vulnerability. This vulnerability is not just the result of the immediate loss. It's the accumulation of every unaddressed feeling, every fear, and every insecurity that was either masked by the relationship or avoided because of it. The act of letting go exposes these raw emotions, and in the initial phase, it can feel as though you are standing completely naked before yourself, without the protection or the distraction that the attachment once provided. In relationships, whether personal or professional, there's an unspoken contract. Even if it's not explicitly stated, there are emotional agreements we make with ourselves about what we give and what we expect in return. When you release someone from your life, that contract is broken. The promises, the future plans, the assumed stability, all of that is stripped away. And with it, you are left with what remains. Your vulnerabilities, your unhealed wounds, your unmet emotional needs. This is the deeper work of emotional confusion, the moment when everything you suppressed or avoided during the relationship resurfaces in full force. The absence of the relationship or situation that once defined you can bring to light feelings of unworthiness or fear of abandonment that were never fully acknowledged. There's a common misconception that love or connection can somehow fix these vulnerabilities. But the truth is, these feelings were always present beneath the surface. Letting go forces you to confront them head on, and that confrontation is uncomfortable. Suddenly, you're alone with yourself in a way you may not have been for a long time. And in that solitude, you begin to see parts of yourself that you've either ignored or been too afraid to face. You may feel exposed, unsure of who you are without the relationship's emotional security blanket. At first, the feelings of vulnerability may manifest as self-doubt. You may question your attractiveness, your ability to maintain relationships, or your sense of worth in the world. These feelings may seem intense, overwhelming, and irrational, but they are the product of years of emotional conditioning and expectations. You relied on external validation, whether from a partner, a job, or a social circle, more than you realized. So when those external sources are gone, you are forced to turn inward. And this inward turn can often feel disorienting because you have never truly relied on yourself for validation before. The emotional confusion arises when you are left without the emotional crutch you once had. This vulnerability doesn't just challenge your sense of worth. It challenges your ability to trust yourself and your judgment. You may find yourself revisiting the past, wondering if you made the right decision. Doubt creeps in, and you second guess your instincts. Did you let go too soon? Did you misinterpret the signs? Could things have been different if you had tried harder? These questions fuel the emotional confusion because they make you question your decisions and your emotional intelligence. But in reality, this vulnerability is simply the beginning of self-discovery. It's a temporary phase, a shedding of the old, a recalibration of your emotional compass. It's uncomfortable, but it's necessary for growth. Moreover, the emotional vulnerability you feel doesn't just arise from your own doubts, it is often heightened by external judgments. When you let go of something or someone, there's a tendency for the world around you to offer unsolicited opinions. Friends, family, and even strangers may have their own perspectives on your decision. And in the early stages, this outside noise can add to the confusion. People might question your decision, telling you that you're better off moving on or that you should have held on longer. Others might tell you that you'll never find someone like them again or that you've made a mistake. These voices, though well-meaning, can amplify the vulnerability you feel because they make you question whether you acted rashly or whether your emotions are clouding your judgment. It's at this point that the real challenge begins. You must learn to trust your own feelings and decisions above the external validation or judgments of others. It's easy to be influenced by the opinions of those around you, but the emotional confusion you're experiencing is a test of your internal strength. You need to lean into your vulnerability, allowing it to teach you how to be self-reliant. The external noise may always be there, but it is your inner voice that will ultimately guide you toward clarity and peace. What's important to remember in these moments is that vulnerability is not a sign of weakness, it is a doorway to strength. It is through vulnerability that we learn to stand in our truth. Letting go requires us to feel deeply, to face uncomfortable emotions, and to step into the unknown with faith that we will emerge stronger on the other side. But before that strength manifests, we must sit with the discomfort, face the feelings we've been avoiding, and allow the vulnerability to move through us without resistance. The power of vulnerability comes from its ability to break down the walls we have built around ourselves. We often create these walls as a defense mechanism, thinking that if we protect ourselves from pain, we can avoid feeling exposed. But what we don't realize is that these walls also prevent us from experiencing growth, intimacy, and self-empowerment. Letting go of something or someone is an invitation to break down these walls, to expose the parts of ourselves we have kept hidden, and to find healing in the process. So yes, vulnerability is a deeply uncomfortable state to be in, especially after letting go. But in truth, it is one of the most profound experiences you can have on the journey of personal transformation. It is only by embracing vulnerability that we can heal old wounds, confront our insecurities, and become more in tune with our true selves. This stage of emotional confusion is not a punishment. It is the emotional cleansing required for you to evolve into the person you were always meant to be. The discomfort is the catalyst for this transformation. And though it may feel overwhelming, it is ultimately the gateway to self-love, self-acceptance, and self-reliance. In the aftermath of letting go, it's natural to experience waves of emotional confusion. As your mind and body adjust to the absence of what once was, there's a tendency to feel disconnected from everything around you. This sense of disconnection can be disorienting and challenging, as it creates a space of emotional solitude that can seem unnerving at first. The initial stages of this disconnection often feel like you're in a fog, where everything seems distant, out of reach, or even meaningless. The world around you continues to move, but you may feel as if you're standing still, unsure of where you belong or what your next steps should be. The disconnection is not just emotional, it's also mental. When you've invested so much energy into something or someone, your mind naturally becomes conditioned to think about it, to prioritize it, to center your thoughts around it. When that attachment is gone, your thoughts may seem aimless or scattered. The usual rhythm of your daily life might no longer feel fulfilling or purposeful. You might find yourself struggling to stay focused, unable to find meaning in tasks you once enjoyed. There's a dissonance between what you're doing and how you're feeling. And that gap can create a sense of emotional numbness or detachment. You're left wondering how to navigate this new space, trying to find footing in a world that no longer feels familiar. The emotional confusion deepens as you realize that you've lost more than just a person or situation. You've lost a framework that once gave you direction. When your identity was intertwined with someone or something, your decisions, your goals, and your daily routines were all shaped by that connection. The absence of that framework forces you to look inward and reimagine what your life looks like now. For many, this can lead to a feeling of aimlessness, as though the ground beneath you has shifted and you're unsure how to regain your balance. This disconnection from your previous life can lead to a sense of emptiness, where you feel like something important is missing. But the truth is, the emptiness you feel is not a void. It's a space waiting to be filled with new energy, new purpose, and new experiences. In this phase, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that you are broken, that there's something wrong with you for feeling disconnected. The emotional confusion can trigger feelings of inadequacy or make you question your ability to navigate life without that past attachment. But what's actually happening is a process of redefinition. You are learning how to exist without that old attachment defining you. The disconnection is part of the healing process, a time when you're shedding old skin and allowing your true essence to emerge. It's a necessary stage for you to rebuild and redefine your sense of self. While it may seem uncomfortable and disorienting in the moment, it is actually a very natural and essential part of your personal growth. The emotional numbness you may experience is also a result of the mind's defense mechanism. When faced with emotional pain, the mind can retreat into numbness as a form of protection. It's easier to feel detached from everything than to confront the depth of the pain caused by the loss or change. This disconnection often feels like an emotional shutdown, where your emotions become muted and everything feels distant. You might not feel sadness immediately after letting go, but you may feel a lingering sense of indifference or apathy. This isn't a sign that you've stopped caring. It's a protective mechanism that temporarily dulls the intensity of your emotions to help you cope. However, this numbness can also create a false sense of security. You might find yourself avoiding the emotions that need to be processed in order to move forward. You may tell yourself that you're fine when deep down you're still holding on to unresolved feelings of hurt, regret, or anger. The numbness can become a way to avoid confronting those emotions, and this avoidance can prolong the emotional confusion. To overcome this stage, you must allow yourself to feel again. You must give yourself permission to reconnect with the emotions that have been suppressed, whether it's grief, fear, anger, or disappointment. These emotions are not weaknesses. They are part of the process of healing. They are the tools that will guide you toward rediscovery and renewal. The emotional confusion you feel during this phase is also a reflection of your internal struggle for control. When you let go of someone or something that once held significant emotional value, you might feel as though you've lost control over your life. The disconnection you experience is not just from the external. It's a disconnection from the sense of control that attachment provided. You may find yourself questioning your decisions, wondering if you should have held on longer or if you made a mistake. These feelings of regret or second guessing are natural, but they can become traps if you allow them to dictate your actions. The truth is, you can't control everything. And part of the emotional confusion stems from trying to force a sense of control over something that was never fully in your hands to begin with. It's important to remember that disconnection is not permanent. It's a temporary state that will eventually give way to clarity and understanding. The emotional confusion you're feeling now is a stepping stone toward healing and self-discovery. As you move through this phase, you'll begin to reconnect with yourself. Slowly, you will find new ways to engage with the world around you, new ways to build your life without relying on the attachment you've let go of. Your mind will begin to find focus again, your emotions will become less muted, and you will rediscover a sense of direction. But it's crucial to give yourself time and space to navigate this period of disconnection. This is the necessary gap that allows you to build a new framework for your life, one that is rooted in your own values, desires, and self-worth. Ultimately, the disconnection you feel is not something to fear. It's simply the space between the old and the new, a time of redefinition and transformation. It may feel uncomfortable now, but in time, you will realize that this disconnection was the very thing that allowed you to reconnect with your true self. It's the process that allows you to let go of the past and move forward into a new chapter of your life. And when you look back, you will see that it wasn't a time of loss, but a time of profound self-discovery and emotional healing. As you move through the emotional storm of letting go, you may come to realize that a significant part of your struggle is rooted in the fear of the unknown. When you let go of something that once gave you a sense of identity, stability, or comfort, you are left with a void that can feel overwhelming. The fear of what comes next can lead to uncertainty about the future and how to move forward. It's easy to get trapped in this fear, believing that you are unprepared or incapable of handling what lies ahead. The emotional confusion you experience in these moments is, in many ways, a manifestation of this fear. The fear of losing control, the fear of stepping into uncharted territory, and the fear of becoming someone you don't recognize. The unknown is intimidating because it disrupts the mental frameworks and expectations you've built. You once had a clear idea of where you were headed, what your life looked like, and who you were with. But when you let go, all those preconceived notions shatter. In the absence of a defined path, you are forced to confront the discomfort of uncertainty. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that because you can't see the future, you are powerless. But this is exactly where the opportunity for growth lies. The unknown is not something to fear, it is something to embrace. The fear of what comes next often comes from a place of attachment to the past. You fear that if you let go, you will lose everything you once had. But in truth, it's not the past that you are losing, it's the limiting beliefs that have kept you stuck. When you let go, you are actually freeing yourself from the constraints that have kept you from moving forward. In this stage, it's common to want to revert back to old patterns, to find comfort in the familiar. You may experience a deep longing to return to what you once had because it felt safe, even if it was unhealthy or no longer serving you. The emotional confusion deepens when you feel pulled in two directions: the pull to stay in the comfort of the past and the pull to move forward into the unknown. This internal tug of war can cause indecision and self-doubt. But it's important to recognize that this conflict is a necessary part of the healing process. It's a sign that you are being called to step out of your comfort zone and into a new phase of your life. The fear of the unknown will always be present. But what's important is how you respond to it. In these moments of emotional confusion, the key to overcoming your fear is to shift your perspective. Rather than focusing on what you may lose, focus on what you stand to gain. The unknown offers endless possibilities for growth, self-discovery, and transformation. Every new chapter of your life brings with it the opportunity to create something greater than what you left behind. The emotional confusion that comes with letting go is simply the process of shedding your old skin. It's about recognizing that you are no longer the person you once were, and that you have the power to create a new version of yourself. The fear of the unknown also stems from the idea of starting over. Starting over can feel daunting because it often implies that you've failed in some way or that you've lost something valuable. But in reality, starting over is not a sign of failure. It's an indication that you're ready for a fresh start, a new beginning, and a new opportunity to rewrite your story. The emotional confusion you feel is a reflection of the resistance to starting anew. You may resist letting go because it feels like you're losing something important. But the truth is, you are gaining everything. You are gaining the freedom to create your own path, free from the constraints of past attachments. The fear of the unknown can also be exacerbated by the societal pressure to have everything figured out. In a world that often demands certainty, it's easy to feel like you're behind or that you should have a clear plan for your future. This pressure can make the emotional confusion feel even more intense as you try to reconcile your internal uncertainty with external expectations. But it's important to remember that no one has it all figured out, and the fear of the unknown is a shared experience. The key to overcoming this fear is to allow yourself to be comfortable with the discomfort of not knowing. It's okay to not have all the answers right now. The unknown is a part of the human experience. And it's through embracing this uncertainty that you discover your true potential. During this phase, you may also experience a sense of impatience. You may want the emotional confusion to end quickly, wanting to rush through the discomfort and get to the other side. But healing and growth take time. The fear of the unknown can make it feel as though you're stuck in a never-ending cycle of confusion. But in truth, this is just the process of your mind and body adjusting to the changes. The discomfort will eventually subside as you step into new experiences and embrace the uncertainty with open arms. Ultimately, the fear of the unknown is not something to avoid or resist. It's a natural part of the journey that forces you to face your deepest fears and insecurities. The emotional confusion that accompanies this fear is not a sign of weakness or failure. It's a sign of your willingness to grow. As you let go and move into the unknown, you are stepping into a space of infinite potential. The fear will always be there, but it no longer has to control you. It's in these moments of uncertainty that you are presented with the greatest opportunities for transformation. When you learn to embrace the unknown, you'll find that it's not as frightening as it seems. It's just a doorway to a new chapter of your life. One that holds the promise of unimaginable growth and new experiences